mistake that a lot of teachers make, especially when they're excited about a topic that they're going to teach. And here's what you can do instead.
I remember sitting under a wonderful teacher who had lots of experience in leadership. He had like three great points and four and five and six, and it just kept coming and coming. I felt like there was like this fire hose. And I think I stopped taking notes after point 10. I was like bored. I'm like, when is this over? Like it's so good, but I could not handle. There were 17 main points. Ah!
As a student, there is only so much that I can absorb in one setting before I just disconnect and I'm checking my phone, I'm checking my watch, I'm waiting for the coffee break.
Think as teachers, this it's easy for us to do this because we love our subject. When
Mhm.
I think about the things that I like to teach and do, I mean, I've been doing them for years and years, and I want my students to know all the cool random things that I've learned.
It's really true. When you love a topic so deeply, you are passionate about it. As a teacher, I could talk for hours and hours and hours about the things that are really important to me, and I can forget what it might be like to hear that for the first time and just how much work it takes to absorb so much new information.
If your students are adults, so anybody older than 17, they've got an adult learning brain.
Mm,
We just
mm,
learn slower and
okay.
we'll tune out. We'll sit there politely,
Yeah.
but we're not absorbing anything. And there's a better way. When you're teaching, when you're prepping to teach, instead of thinking, okay, what's everything I know about this topic?
Mhm.
We want to encourage you to instead start by thinking, what do you want your students to gain?
Okay, so Cindy, you're saying instead of thinking first about everything that I know, all the things that I love, all the ways I can impress my students with my cool facts and all my stories, to actually flip it completely around and think, what do I want the student to have at the end of this time together? That's a
Yes.
big shift.
It is. It has narrowed down. It's like pointed. It's given direction and focus to what I'm teaching. So instead of just throwing like a waterfall at them,
Mhm.
it's like we've turned on the faucet and they can get a glass of water and drink it. They can actually approach it. So when I'm thinking about what I want the students to gain, I think in three categories. What do I want my students to know about this subject? What do I want them to feel? What emotions do I want them to have around a subject? And what do I want them to be able to do? What
Mhm.
actions can they do now that they've been exposed to this subject? That's
Mhm.
how I will build my teaching.
So what that sounds like to me is you've taken all the things that you know and you've narrowed it down to a much smaller thing, but then you've also narrowed that down into three different, very specific categories, which has got to be a lot of work actually as a teacher. You really have to think through, not just here's 4 hours of things that I love about swing dancing, but here's three specific things that I want, three different categories I want to offer.
Know you love swing dancing and you've
Yeah.
been doing it for years. I know you do some teaching. So
Yeah.
how would you do it with this method?
Great, great question. Know, feel, and do. So if somebody comes to a swing dance class for the very first time, I have to also realize that they're probably freaked out, they're nervous, they're embarrassed, they're afraid of making mistakes. So I have to be very careful the way that I approach it with an attitude that's very positive and encouraging. I try to remember what it was like for me to go to my first dance class and think I was so nervous. Okay, in terms of what I want them to know, I will want them to know something about where the dance came from, that it was an African American roots in Harlem, it was in the 1930s. So I want them to know some of the like context and some of the facts maybe between their left and right, and that it's a partner dance and you have a lead and a follow. Some of the names of the steps, like a 6-step basic and a tuck turn. I want them to feel encouraged, like connected to their partner and the different people in the room experience and feel like, okay, I can do that. Even if I'm not a dancer, I can learn some of these things so that it's possible. What I want them to do is to be able to make it through a whole dance on the dance floor with their partner. And if they can do that, that is an amazing outcome for the very first class.
Like that would be fun to walk away from a dance class
Mhm.
and be able to like dance through a whole song, kind of good. I would be so encouraged and want to come back. If you had given me a lecture on for an hour on the roots of it, I'm like, that's kind of interesting, but I came here to dance.
Or if I had just been like, let me show you all these cool things, and me and another experienced dancer entertained you, you might have enjoyed that, but you actually hadn't learned anything about how to dance.
He was using it with a teacher. He wanted some help training. He was a Bible teacher and
Mhm.
he loved First Peter. And
Okay.
he had his allotted time and he would stand up and say everything he knew about First Peter. And he never got through all his points. Mostly because he fell down a rabbit hole of the
Mhm.
Roman Empire. The students were like, I think I learned more about Rome than the actual book of the Bible. What do you want your students to know? And this gave him a lens. He actually spent some time praying, and he's like, First Peter was written to Christians under persecution. And it
Mhm.
was a way to encourage them. How do I live when the government is actively against me? And what did he want them to feel?
Mhm.
He recognized there can be a lot of fear. Christians are afraid. What if the government is after us? And how do we respond? He wanted them to understand that those feelings of fear and the encouragement that God is with you, Peter is bringing through this book. And then what do you want them to do? He wanted them to have eyes for Christians under persecution today. As he was teaching, he was leaving out some of what he had otherwise talked about. He was kind of in this flow. Now had this lens from First Peter of what these Christians were going like. And he's like, that was a completely different way for me to teach. And my students walked away with something.
It's a beautiful story, Cindy. And what it makes me think, though, is that as a teacher, I will probably, if I had this lens of know, feel, and do, especially knowing that I maybe only have 1 hour or 4 hours, or if I'm speaking in a DTS, I've only got 12 hours. So there's not actually that much I can teach in terms of what people can actually know differently, feel, and do differently. So I'm going to have to slow down. I think this is what I'm hearing. I got to slow down. I've got to realistically think about how far people can go if they're learning something or talking about something, a topic maybe for the first time, and the being selective, which is so hard because I really do want people to know every single thing that I've ever known about a topic.
It's a challenge that way. And I think we have been under the model of the fire hose. A good teacher has like filled my notebook. I have pages and pages and pages of notes.
Mhm.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
But I think the true test is what do they actually remember and what are they putting into practice? I've come to the point where I would rather than putting things into practice and remembering things years later, and I've taught them less content.
Mhm.
Another teacher that did a seminar I was doing, he was the maintenance guy. And we had all of these older vacuum cleaners. It was a real hodgepodge. And the students were complaining because they're like, the dumb vacuum cleaners don't even work. So
Mhm.
he was going to teach us how to make the vacuum cleaners work well. So he rounded up all the vacuum cleaners and they were there in the classroom. And he talked about here's what a vacuum cleaner does and here's what it needs and air filters, and we were all like, oh, he wanted us to feel like we can help do some simple maintenance on these vacuum cleaners so they work. Then he had us like taking them apart and looking for the air filters, the little foamy things, and every vacuum cleaner was different, but we kind of got the hang of it. So there we are, and we're banging the dust out, or we're doing all this stuff to clear them out. I think we washed some of them and put them back in, and they worked. Then he's like, "Okay, how do they work now?" And it took an hour, and I can now do that on my vacuum cleaners. This is years and years later. I'm like, "Oh, this was so helpful." I loved how he put that together.
Yeah, and that's an amazing example of what we've just talked about you have your goal as a teacher of what you want your students to walk away from. He didn't tell you everything he knew about vacuums. He had one specific problem that he was trying to fix and empower you to fix about cleaning the air filter and having a workable vacuum. And now all these years later, it is still stuck with you. So that is a really incredible example. So we have a few questions for you as you're listening to this. If you were a teacher, the first question that you can consider is what is your approach when you get invited or you have to start preparing for a teaching? Do you have more of the fire hose, try to dump every single thing? Or have you thought about what you actually want your students to walk away with?
Second question, can you think back when you've sat under a whole bunch of waterfall, fire hose teaching? How did you feel? when a teacher was communicating like a fire hose.
The third question is, what would you take from this teaching, this session that we've had, that could impact the way that you prepare to teach in the future?